This session is Community Wealth Building in Practice. It's a panel session. We're going to hear from Neil McElroy, Chief Exec Centre for Local Economic Strategies, CLES, and from Craig Hatton, Chief Executive of North Ayrshire Council. And in this session, folks, we'll explore community wealth building approaches and practice, sharing successful implementation policy and practices that have supported numerous interventions across Scotland. Everyone's heard about the great work of North Ayrshire Council that they've done in community wealth building. And if you were with us last year at our conference, you would have heard from Councillor Cullinan, who talked on community wealth building also. And you will no doubt have heard of Neil and CLES and the pioneering work that the guys are doing across the country. They need little introduction, and in actual fact, both organisations have been referenced in our previous speakers this morning. I'll join Craig and Neil in the panel session, and I'll add a little bit at the end of their things. And we'll hear more about community wealth building and practice. We're going to take about 10 minutes each, and then we'll leave time at the end, folks, for some questions. So I'm going to hand over to Neil, who'll share his presentation. Neil.
Thank you, Stephen. Delighted to be here at the Academy, and I'll just share my screen, and Stephen's going to give me a thumbs up or something to make sure it's working. Oh, take a wee bit of time there. Come on. Oh, there it goes. Do you see the screen?
Not quite. Yeah, it's you now, Neil. Thank you.
Great. Brilliant. Thank you, Stephen. As Stephen said, I'm the Chief Executive of the Centre for Local Economic Strategies, but I'm also, at the moment, part-time seconded to the Scottish Government in the Regional Economic Development Directorate as a Community Wealth Building Advisor. But today I'm speaking about from a CLES perspective. I know Miriam probably talked about it this morning, but just in case you missed that session, very quickly what community wealth building is. In essence, what community wealth building, global movement, it's moving fast. In fact, Joe Biden mentioned community wealth building yesterday, I think, in terms of advancing community wealth building in America, part of their stimulus package. But it's looking to alter the economic system so it supports greater wealth and prosperity and makes a bigger contribution to reducing inequality. It's a development of economic development. It breaks with the past because it's putting more emphasis now on ensuring all Scots have an active stake in producing and gaining from economic activity and wealth. We've thought in the past in Scotland or everywhere about redistribution of wealth. Get the growth and then we redistribute it to people. This is more about pre-distribution. How do we hotwire into wealth and economic success into people and communities in the lives of all Scots as the economy actually works, not just after the fact of any economic success. Thinking about this, it's about, and this is what links to procurement and commissioning and spending. It's about flows here. It's about flows of wealth. Where are the streams of wealth going? Where are the lochs? Where are the burns? Where are the reservoirs? And how do we stop the leaky bucket? How do we stop plugging some of those leaks to external shareholders from the Cayman Islands or non-distant suppliers that could be anywhere in the world? How do we actually plug some of those leaks of that flow of wealth? And of course, so we eventually, the more Scots in our communities can capture that wealth. And of course, procurement is a key factor in all that. Now, the Scottish Government has taken forward community wealth building as a means to practically deliver on its wellbeing economy, landing the wellbeing economy locally in the ways that different organisations operate, particularly around procurement. I'll come on that a bit in a minute. It's guided by the National Performance Framework, and there now is, and actually had a meeting with them this morning, a new Minister for Community Wealth, Mr. Arthur, who is now, so it's up the ante, if you like, in the profile in Scotland community wealth building. There's 5 pillars of community wealth building, not just procurement, though it's an important one, but all of those are important too. And particularly the link between spending and how it relates to different forms of ownership in our economy, growing our SME base, growing our social enterprises, growing our co-ops, growing our mutuals, growing our CICs, growing our community development trust. That's a key axis, if you like, spending and how it builds this inclusive ownership. And also its links to other elements, including finance, workforce, and land and property. In community wealth building, public sector anchors are key. The health boards, the police, the local authorities. They have a role in the economics of well-being. They are economic agents as a purchaser, but also as an employer and an owner of land and property. So, and I think in community planning partnerships and the growth of anchor charters and anchor networks that Craig will talk about are really important in this regard, bringing that totality of those anchors together to think about how do they purchase progressively and sustainably. Simply, you'll know all this, you know, procurement people, but simply what this is about, procurement, not just a transaction, not just getting the point of what you need. It's thinking about procurement as wider investment and how it actually ripples through and creates multipliers within an economy. Now, a few final thoughts to finish, and just the particular way we need to think about procurement moving forward. The firstly is we've got the community benefits agenda in Scotland, but that's not the only way we should be thinking about sustainable progressive procurement. All public spending should be thinking about advancing well-being, and that includes the mainstream anchor organisations, how they think. Community benefits is great, that's brilliant, but that's not, you should be thinking about the wider stuff as well beyond the community benefits activity. Every single pound you've got should be thinking about this wider well-being aspirations. Other specific points. We have said for many years at CLES, and we started in this journey around procurement, what, 15, 20 years ago, is that procurement is an economic development lever. CLES is the UK's national organisation for local economies. For us, we got interested in procurement because we've seen that as a key economic development lever, vastly overwhelmed, much more than what the economic development budget is. Yeah, pales in significance the economic development budget compared to what procurement is. So we say that procurement is economic development. It's a key economic development lever. We should see it as economic development. And procurement, thus, should be corporately centred in the organisation, not hidden away in the wee finance department, corporately centred, because you are spending that money, and that money relates to how we can create better social, ecological, and economic just Scotland. It's not just a transaction. It's actually something much more corporately important than just a transaction. I've mentioned it, but procurement, that demand that you create in the economy, how that links to inclusive ownership, the co-ops, the SMEs, is really important supply. And that access is so important. And all the work you do in animating and building up supply is fundamentally important, because what's the point of having great procurement if you don't have a ready-made supply that offers those wider well-being aspirations and those community benefits? Also, increasingly in Scotland, we're seeing procurement as a source of innovation and supply. The idea that you can procure a good or service from a company who's innovative, who's creative, that is a big fill-up. That's business development money. That money that good or service you're purchasing may end up providing ballast for them to get into different markets, to export markets. It's fundamentally seen as an innovation in supply, a business development tool, an innovative tool, a tool to create a new economy, is the force we can see this procurement. National frameworks are fundamentally important, but we do need to flex them, and I know you are all flexing them, to ensure supply is imbued with wider well-being. Now, I'm going to finish, well, the next slide, it's just a question for you, really, and it's something I'm intrigued with, and I'd like to hear your feedback on it. Is there a tension between the general duties of procurement and sustainable procurement? The general duties of procurement say that we need to a contracting authority must, in carrying and regulate procurement, must be equally and without discrimination. That's the general duties. Is there a tension? And how do you work through that tension when the sustainable procurement duty wants you to improve the economic, social, and environmental being of authorities area and facilitate the involvement of small and medium? Is there a tension? Is it a helpful tension? Is that a wrinkle? Is it a problem? I'd like to hear your thoughts on that. And finally, in terms of the rollout of community wellbeing in Scotland, moving fast, but you'll hear from Craig in a moment, who's been doing great stuff around this in North Air for a few years now. Clackmannanshire is also on this game. Glasgow City region, particularly around sustainable procurement and construction and how that relates to the wider supply chain. Western Isles have a full action plan covering the 5 pillars. South of Scotland, interesting work there too. It's focused on the housing sector, 6 registered social landlords in the south of Scotland, and how they can use the procurement and commission activities to advance innovation, well-being and community benefits within the supply chain. There's moves afoot in Scottish Government to embed community wealth building in a range of Scottish Government policy, and there's a clear link across with other stakeholders like COSLA and SOSI. That's been a canter through. I hope I've kept my time. I'll shut up now, and I'm really looking forward to hearing the other speakers, including Craig. Thanks a lot.
Neil, thank you. That was perfectly in time. And I'll hand over now to Craig.
Okay, good morning, everybody. Always really good to hear from Neil. As a council, we've worked with Neil and CLES and a number of organisations to help us develop this community wealth building story and journey that we've been on for the last few years. If you can move on to slide 2, Robin. The next one, please, that'd be good. So as Neil said on his slide, we started thinking around this probably around 2017, 18, into 19, we really started to get mobilised. And that resulted in May 2020 in the pandemic, when we're in that first wave of launching our community wealth building strategy. It was something completely new. We spent a lot of time developing this. And one of the key drivers for us was the traditional economic models in North Ayrshire simply aren't working. We have high levels of unemployment, we have high levels of deprivation, and we need to do something different. And community wealth building provides this opportunity. But it's not easy, as anything that's new and really at the forefront. It's not easy, but it's something that we feel is really, really worthwhile doing. It's a bold approach, and it uses the economic levers available to local and regional anchor institutions to create a more resilient local economy, more diverse businesses, more well-paid jobs for local people, but importantly, across the whole community. It's about using that spend to really benefit the local area and the local community. If you could move on, Robin, please. So on this slide, you can see our strategic objectives, and it's built on 5 pillars. Progressive procurement, again, what we're talking around this morning. Fair work and employment, and I think that's something that really strikes a chord with me, because this is not around the few business owners making more profit. This is about ensuring that whole organisations and companies apply fair work practices and principles so that the whole community benefits from local growth. About how we use our land and assets and maximising the value of that. Our financial power to invest locally, again, that local dimension. And finally, to support plural ownership and sustainability of the local economy. We all know that cycle of businesses opening, closing, and SMEs in particular, probably first generation, second generation, and then often die away. And it's really important we look at how people who are employed with that can take ownership or a stake in these businesses. It's really, really an important aspect that we follow there. If you can move on, Robin, please. So how will we deliver community wealth building? Well, the key to it is about collaboration and working in partnership with our local communities, local businesses, the wider regional anchor institutions to ensure positive long-term transformational change. We know we can't change the economy overnight, but what we need to do is put in these plans and look for that long-term change, but all importantly, quick wins also. To help facilitate collaboration across a range of partners, we established what is known as the Community Wealth Building Commission, chaired by Joe Cullinan, the leader of the council, and it's got senior execs from all the local partners, the 3 Ayrshire councils, NHS Ayrshire and Arran, the College, Scottish Enterprise, Police, Fire and Rescue, and the third sector through the Ayrshire Community Trust. And they're all committed to driving forward this new approach by investing and spending locally to support businesses and our communities prosper. Of course, you need to support this with staffing. It is really, really important. You know, you can't just come up with a strategy and then don't have the resources to implement that. And we've invested in 10 new members of staff to support the journey, embed these new approaches across all council services. But one of the key aspects is about how we engage with businesses. And we've also appointed 3 new business locality officers to support businesses to tender for public contracts. We all know the frustrations with smaller businesses around procurement and tendering for contracts, how we can help them develop the skills, the offer, to help them win these local contracts. Because one thing that I'm really, really clear on in terms of this is not about awarding a contract to an uncompetitive business at an uncompetitive price. It's about, we want to give work locally, but we want those businesses to be sustainable. And that's where this work is beyond procurement teams, but those economic development teams and how they support businesses, but also linking that procurement wave plan that we term it. What are the future opportunities? Are local businesses aware of them? Are they skilled, have the capacity to help win those contracts? It's really, really important. And we've also recruited a community benefits officer to maximise our approach to community benefits in a way that is meaningful and relevant to all our communities. And we will have seen many tenders where community benefits come in and people think, oh yes, we can do that. We'll pay the living wage or we'll offer some apprentices. But is that really enough? And if you think about the construction sector, 99% of people are paid above the living wage anyway, so they automatically tick that box. But how do we really make a difference in the value of that contract? Because contractors do become smart around how they talk around meeting our varying clauses, and it's really important that we look to push that by working with them to develop and offer more and more. If we can move on, Robin, please. So achieving the new target will require a diverse local business base, and I've spoken a little bit around the capacity and upskilling to help businesses bid and win for public contracts. And the business development team work proactively with all businesses, improve that visibility of upcoming tendering activities, access to specific training to help them have the skills to win council contracts through a fair and equitable procurement exercise. If you can move on, please, Robin. So what are some of our quick changes, key achievements around progressive procurement? So we use a system of quick quotes for low value contracts. And how we've worked with that is we work with the business development team to identify local suppliers who may be able to tender or submit bids for those public sector contracts. And we've taken the decision, if 5 local suppliers have the capability and capacity to do the work and agree to bid, then procurement will be restricted to those suppliers in that quick quote process. We think that's something different. We're still ensuring a competitive process in terms of that. Our place-based locality approach and new business locality advisors are proactively supporting businesses and community-led activities with supply chain development, business startup and sustainability. We know in the bigger ODU contracts, for example, that some of it, we probably haven't got the capacity in our local economy to deliver on those. But if we can join those companies up with the major contractors who win those and get some local benefit from them in terms of supply. And we had a really, really good example when we built a new school, and a company down the road from the school supplied the steel. And that was fantastic, how we just linked that up. And obviously they had to provide a competitive price to become a subcontractor, but that linking is really, really important. We've also developed an Ayrshire-wide procurement work stream as part of the Community Wealth Building Commission of Ayrshire anchor institutions. And the group are exploring ways to increase local spend and identify joint procurement opportunities. We're clearly working around that. That is challenging. All of this is challenging. It's not easy, but it's something very, very worthwhile and something that we're on a journey with. And we also developed an anchor charter, and that commits signatories to undertake supply chain and spend analysis with the intention of growing local spend. We've currently got 7 anchors signed up to the charter, the 3 Ayrshire councils, NHS Ayrshire and Arran, Ayrshire College, Scottish Enterprise, and the Community Trust that I spoke around earlier. But as we move forward, we want to break that out a little bit more into private sector companies as well, who have got a real anchor in the community, and how we can work with them around their procurement, their supply, to help spread the benefit of community wealth building. If you can move on, Robin, please. So it's not just about procurement. I spoke around the 5 pillars. Our community benefits officer is looking at our current policy to maximise our approach to benefits. We're implementing a process to ensure that all tenders over £4 million, the community benefits section is scored and weighted, which is something we didn't do before. It was a yes or no. So those who want to do more will get recognised in terms of that evaluation process. And we'll have that up front, so it's very fair and transparent, because it is important we comply with procurement regulations. We want to introduce community involvement and participatory approaches to identifying and agreeing community benefits. So if we're going to develop this community benefit offer through our tender process, those benefits need to be meaningful and relevant to the needs of the community. Again, really, really important. I gave the example of the living wage, but other benefits, it's really important that we get that through. Some of you will be familiar with the Ayrshire Growth Deal, £251 million investment in the area, and part of that we've got a £3 million community wealth building growth deal fund. And at the heart of the growth deal is how we get community wealth building into that £250 million that gives a clear delivery route to help realise our local and regional wealth building aspirations. The growth deal is not just about spending £250 million. That's relatively easy. It's about how you maximise the benefit of that spend, and that was some of the things that Neil was talking around earlier. And the £3 million fund provides boots on the ground to engage and work with anchor institutions, private sector businesses, the social economy to support wealth building activities and deliver an inclusive regional economy, because that's the aim throughout this. Over the summer 22, we ran a Keep It Local marketing campaign and ran it again in the spring to support local businesses, particularly as they emerge from lockdown, encouraging staff and residents to shop and stay local, include encouraging local employment and investment around wealth building. In January this year, we approved the development of a ground-mounted solar PV farm at Nethermains, and we're just about to embark on another. We've just about finished the business case on a former landfill site. And landfill can often be a bit of a blight on the local community, but this is now closed. How can we use that better, repurposing that land to generate income to the council, but also through our community benefits aspect of our renewable process, where 15% of the process goes into our community investment fund. We're feeding that back in, so the whole community benefits from that. And most recently, we created a £500,000 Green Jobs Fund to support community groups and businesses in that transition to green economy, adaptations to help them reduce carbon emissions and create local fair green jobs. We want to be at the forefront of this, and everybody's moving really quickly. And we felt a lot of our businesses, smaller businesses, didn't have the capacity, I suppose, and the access to knowledge to move forward. And that creates a fund, as well as our physical support to try and move forward. And I think that just takes me on to the last slide, Robin, if you can move on. So I'd just like to finish off with that 5 lessons from our community wealth building journey today. We are still in the early stages, but it's really important you set a vision that is clear, ambitious, but practical and gets buy-in. And we think to date, we've been really successful with that buy-in. Establishing anchor institutions, working with them, working in collaboration. It does take time. We need to work across traditional silos, across organisations, across services. Again, it's really important. We need to rethink how we do things. The traditional ways haven't always worked for us. Build that awareness, show quick wins, so people buy in and see this really, really makes a difference. Bottom up engagement is really important, that place-based resource, the investment to support that. And as I said earlier, we've put staff resources into work in the community with local businesses to support them win the tenders that we issue, but also how they can support the local community more through fair work, through how they use their assets, through community benefits, a range of things. And the other thing is, it's really important that you have challenging feedback. Quite often strategies are written and they're put on a shelf and we continue on. And we've established a community wealth building expert advisory panel, and we put all our policies through that panel now to ensure they have that community wealth building aspect, that we are still true to that strategy and those values. And that has been invaluable for us, and we're very, very grateful for the people who've joined that to help us continually shape, develop and inform our offer, not only around procurement, but around how the council operates as a whole. And I think that just draws me to a close. Hopefully I haven't taken too much longer than 10 minutes, but thank you.
Craig, that was fantastic. Thank you very much. I'm going to try and follow the guys, and they are both a hard act to follow, right? But the one good thing is this isn't a competition, right? It's not a competition. And I've said this for years, guys, that's the great thing about the Scottish public sector, right? People are happy to share what went well and equally happy to share what didn't work. And for me, that's the best demonstration of community, that ability to share. And for me, folks, that's our superpower, right? It's the superpower of the public sector. We just need to remember it and use it more. Scotland Excel, like many of you, have been passionate about community wealth building before we knew the term. And clearly it's more than what we've been doing, but a good proportion of it is a lot of the things that you guys have been doing for a number of years. Today, I want to briefly talk to you about the work we've been doing, working in partnership with Scottish Government. And it's a short piece of work, and we're at the fairly early stages of it, but I wanted to share what we're doing and what our intention is and some of the initial findings, folks. So we're working with 4 councils, Stirling Council, Clackmannanshire Council, Renfrewshire Council and Dumfries and Galloway Council. The programme that we're working on in each of the councils on community wealth building is segmented into 7 projects, and the projects are Grow Local. A number of you will be familiar with the tool. Perhaps you have it, perhaps you haven't been using it as much as you could. So one of the projects is looking at the Grow Local tool, and earlier on we talked about, there was a question about knowing who the suppliers are in the community. Well, this tool looks like it can provide additional information. It looks like it provides, identifies where there are opportunities, and that's something within the councils we're going to test. We're going to look at it and probably make some recommendations about how it could be used better, or maybe even how it could be improved. So that's the first one of the projects. The second one is internal partner engagement, and we heard quite a bit of that in Craig's presentation there. It's about economic development really being on board. It's about elected members being on the same place as you, and Mark asked a question, or someone asked a question earlier on about what is local, making sure we understand and we get the support across the organisation. What do we really mean by local, and the services, getting everybody on board. So the project will look at talking to services about what is local, talking about the tools that they use today. But importantly, it also includes a project on external partner engagement. So working with our colleagues and partners in Supplier Development Programme, talking to colleagues in the FSB, and last week I was speaking to the Chamber about the great work that public procurement do, and had my first request today about giving some support to a company. So really having open, honest, courageous conversations with partners where actually it may be that we know we're doing well, but perhaps other areas can do better. So having some of those courageous conversations, because actually we all share that passion for community, and that's something that really comes to the fore. Data. We have a wealth of data, and Val mentioned that earlier on, not just about more data, but the piece of work is also looking at the data that we have. What does it tell us? And sometimes it's about bringing data together within the same organisation and using it to further our community wealth building aims. So it's about better use of the data, looking at some of the tools that we share the data, and Grow Local I mentioned earlier is one of those examples. So data will feature heavily within our programme, and it is at the outset. And again, in a previous session, I talked about running these sessions, and the sessions are all data led. They use the evidence of the council to demonstrate the work that they do and the work that potentially they could do to further the aims of community wealth building. Craig talked about quick quotes. We think quick quotes is a vital tool, it's an important tool. And Craig talked about that example that, speaking frankly, would have been shocking to some people some time ago when we talked about doing a quick quote, and if there are 5 local companies restricting it to 5 local companies. Most of you have a policy in place already where if it's 3 quick quotes, 1 of them should be local. If it's 5, 2 should be. This is a step further, and I think that's an important point. So the project for quick quotes will look at quick quotes. It will analyse your current utilisation, because even though you have that policy, when was the last time you actually looked to see if it was being adhered to? Or what is the performance rate of your own organisation in those quick quotes? How many local suppliers have been successful through quick quotes? And absolutely we realise that those businesses may not be there. But again, is that an opportunity if those businesses aren't there working with economic development colleagues about what the art of the possible is? Another project within the programme is Public Contract Scotland. You are all very familiar, know it much better than me. But we're looking at we're looking at a deeper use of Public Contract Scotland. We're looking at how do we really expand the use of Public Contract Scotland within our supply base. I think there are something like 330,000 businesses in Scotland, and finger in the air, probably 10 to 15% of those are registered in Public Contract Scotland. What does that mean about the rest? Do they not want to do business with the public sector? Maybe. Or do we need to look at how we get more on? How do we engage them? How do we do more with those organisations that are already registered? And we heard from North Ayrshire Council, but I know that for a number of years now, South Ayrshire Council take a step where they'll write to everybody who registers in Public Contract Scotland in their area and welcome them. So little things within Public Contract Scotland we're looking at in each of those councils. And the last project looks at each of those and reflects on the work that each of the teams have done in the 4 councils and said, okay, what could we do to pump prime and do something quick and tangible for the organisation to use that to demonstrate that we can do more. There is more to do. We're doing great work, but there's more to do, and identifying a project within each of the councils, and those have started. I know as I'm saying all of this, a number of you are probably thinking, but we're doing this already. But I know we can do more. You have to check we are doing it, but we can do more. We need to do much more. I'm still struck by Miriam's comment earlier on about the poverty in Scotland, and 1/3 of the Scottish population having less than £500 savings, or in debt. 1/3 of the population. So initial findings from the work, and it's early stages, folks. It's early stages of our project, working in partnership with Scottish Government. Well, the first thing is it confirms that the public sector is doing a lot, but actually often we're not telling people the great work that we do. You do great, fantastic work, and great, Craig. It's fantastic to hear about North Ayrshire. I could probably tell you for another 31 councils and the multitude of other public bodies on today, the great work they're doing. But guys, you need to tell people about the work you're doing. You need to tell your own communities, tell them why you're doing it, and tell them how we can do more. We are advocating simply the Scottish model of procurement, and it is a fundamental at the heart of community wealth building. SME and third-party engagement, you've been doing it for years. Sustainability, many years. Community benefits, we're going to hear about that next. But again, you are doing a lot of work in community benefits and taking it to the next stage. Transparency, there is complete transparency in what we do in the Scottish public sector. £13 billion worth of spend, able to be viewed through Public Contract Scotland. There are many countries that would wish for that sort of transparency. We haven't heard much today about supported employment, a particular passion of me and of Scotland Excel. So supported businesses and supported employment, again, is at the heart of what we're doing in procurement. That is community wealth building. The environmental aspects. On Monday, I talked about the many speakers who came and talked about the great stuff that we're doing in environmental. Every single one of those has an impact on community wealth building. And in an earlier session, one of the presenters talked about living wage. That is part and parcel of everything that you do as procurement professionals. And I might get this stat wrong, but I think in the last year, 91% of suppliers through Scotland Excel frameworks pay the living wage. That's things that we should be proud of and we should be shouting about more. But we can do more, and the time is right. The time is right, folks. Sometimes the things we do, we assume are happening or not. We can check that. Some of the things we missed might be possible now, and previously it might not have been possible. And I'm going to give Craig a warning here. I'm going to ask him a question about resources, because earlier on, quite rightly, somebody said in the chat that procurement kind of feels like the service that delivers everything against all of your policies, when often those policies might even compete for our attention and might compete with each other. So let's go back to the superpower. In the programme, we're super conscious that we all need to work together. We need to multiply that superpower, not just share ideas, but share tools, tips, everything like that. We need to keep talking to supplier development programme. What did we try that helped within our programme? How can that influence the work that Gillian and her team are doing? We need to listen to what CLES are saying and the other stakeholders that are informing us. We need to learn from organisations like North Ayrshire Council and many others who are doing it. We need to look at what Glasgow are doing. We need to hear what Scottish Prison Service, what Strathclyde Journey, what the multitude of Scottish public bodies are doing with community wealth building. It's our superpower. You know, imagine if we could get all that together, all that passion, all that knowledge and deliver. That is a true economic multiplier. The passion for community wealth building is here today, folks. Seize the day, grab the moment, find a way of telling your story, fit it into the frame of community wealth building, and I think you'll find that the time is right for people to listen. I'm going to finish now. I'm going to ask Neil and Craig to come back in, and I will open up for questions. So I've been too busy gabbing to see if there's any hands up. So let me start off while I'm waiting and ask Craig that question. Craig, procurement, the service that delivers everything to everyone every time, right? With a wee tiny procurement team. And I'm being facetious, Craig, right? Because I know about the investment you've made and a number of organisations have made. What would you recommend to colleagues in those procurement teams that maybe, you know, need a bit of a hand in helping understand those priorities, helping fight that fight for community wealth when they know they can do more, but perhaps resources and priorities are at odds?
I think one of the really important things around this is it's not just about the procurement team, it's not just about the economic development team, it's about the council as a whole in terms of that procurement team. And we established the procurement board with representatives from all services, so we are sharing the burden and sharing experience, sharing frustrations. You know, there's no doubt about that, because the three things, I've said this at a conference before, so there are three things that I've heard over my career that you can't do things about. Well, you can't do that because of procurement regulations. You can't do that because of health and safety. And for those of you who have worked in the housing sector, you can't do that because of the housing regulator. You know, you've got to push that to one side. There is a framework to operate within, and we need to be mindful of that. But all too often, there's a negative connotation with all these things, and it's about working positively together, sharing the burden. And I know our procurement manager, Anne Linden, is actually on the conference, but as Anne will recognise, we strengthened the procurement team a number of years ago, and it's working differently now to how it worked before, but it is sharing the burden and prioritising. And I'm sure Anne will recognise that the procurement board was key to that, and making sure that people who go to that board are senior decision makers, and one thing that's not acceptable to me, and no, you know, sort of disrespect to certain members of staff, but people will send junior members of staff. I'm far too important for that. This is important. This is a game changer, and you need to work together across the whole organisation. Okay, thank you, Craig. Neil, your challenge and your question to the audience has been responded quite vigorously throughout the chat. I'm going to ask Bridget Lambert if the guys can unmute her to maybe state one of the questions. However, Neil, we will obviously record all these responses and we'll forward them on to you. But if we can unmute Bridget. Bridget, are you there?
Stephen. I'm unmuted. Yay!
Hey!
I know, brilliant. Neil, I've put a big long response up, so I'll not read the big long response out to you, but effectively what I was saying is that at the moment, I don't think that there is a tension between the requirements of the Sustainable Procurement Duty and the legislation. And we're very lucky to have the Sustainable Procurement Duty in Scotland. I think that puts us ahead of the UK government, and it supports us and enables us to deliver excellent, as we've spoken about, community benefits, but also the fair work practices, which is really important. You know, through fair work, we're able to promote fair employment, better working conditions, and better training opportunities. And that's something procurement have been really good at. I am a wee bit concerned about the development of the Community Wealth Building Act, and I'm hoping very much that you've got Scottish Government procurement involved in that to make sure that there is no misalignment between the legislation, because it would be unfortunate if it was, you know, aspirational, but the regulations as they stand at the moment didn't allow us to fulfil the requirements of the Act. So just hoping that there'll be a good balance there. But one more point I want to make, Stephen, and this is where you'll wish you hadn't unmuted me. It might not sit very comfortably with all these positive discussions, because the discussions really are positive. But something that we really can't lose sight of when we're letting contracts is the needs of the service users. And I worry sometimes that when we talk about supported businesses and local businesses and this really strong focus in local, that the local business, no matter how worthy they might be, may not be able to fully meet the needs of what could be a very vulnerable client group. So in terms of balance and thinking about tensions in what we do, we need to make sure that at all of this, at the heart, we're balancing our objectives for community wealth building, which are fantastic, with the objective to make sure that we deliver the best possible service to end users. And here end, I'll unmute.
Bridget, I completely agree. Do either Craig or Neil have a comment for Bridget? I have one more question I can bring in if we've got time.
Very quickly, that was great, Bridget. It's a long way to go in terms of Community Wealth Building Act, but already the idea of the problem of misalignment and making sure all the ducks in a row and not cutting across existing legislation, I think is in the mix. So hopefully that won't occur. And just the point about user, respect to user groups, and that, I think that's a very important point you raised there, and I think it does talk to wider economic and social and well-being aspects of the economy and how we improve supply to respond to user needs, and so they're competing over fulfilling user needs in a much stronger way than perhaps they sometimes do. But Bridget, that was a brilliant comment, and thanks for that answer. Thank you.
Okay, we'll get.
Can I just add a little bit?
On you go.
I think the need of the local client groups and the use group is critically important. As I will always say, you can't collect bins in the back of a Ford Escort. You know, you've got to have the right tools to do the job. And that's where our approach is about building the local business base, building that capacity, building that capability, so that local businesses are able to provide the services that we need, and therefore ensuring that the public pound in terms of the service delivery is absolutely spot on. And that's not going to happen overnight, but you can't give a contract to a local business just because they're local and deliver the wrong thing for you. You know, it's got to be right, and it's working with businesses. That's where the real work around this. And a lot of people say, oh, it's all about procurement. It's not. That's one part of it. It's about building the capacity and capability in the local business base. Okay,
thank you, Craig. Nick Hyde has his hand up, and I feel shamed if I don't let him ask a question after chastising all these people to put their hands up. Can we unmute Nick? And Nick can actually be quite concise.
Firstly, thanks all, Craig, Neil, Stephen. Really interesting session. Took a multitude of notes throughout this, but I'm glad, Stephen, you mentioned that Stirling are one of the 4 projects that are working with Scotland Excel. We're really at the start of this journey, so it is information gathering in so many ways. The question, Stephen, you mentioned Grow Local and the use of Grow Local.
Yes.
And I'm wondering on the chat earlier on in one of the sessions, I mentioned that Stirling have locality action plans, which we're trying to point in the direction so that we can get real benefits within areas of specific deprivation within Stirling. Is there a link, and how can potentially we create that link, I think is the question.
Obviously, as you're aware, we're at kind of early stages of the Grow Local in terms of its capability and the depth of information that it has. I think my initial thoughts are, Nick, that it helps identify opportunity areas. How fruitful it will be in identifying those companies that can tie into that plan, I don't know.
Okay. I think it's interesting because we're trying, as part of the project, to bring as much of this to life as we possibly can and create real tangible actions that we can do within Stirling.
Okay, folks, I'm conscious I'm now out of time and I've got a hand up, Mark, so I've already apologised to Mark. So I have to finish now and say thank you to Craig, thank you to Neil, thanks to the audience for the questions and for the guys for actually asking the questions online, which is fantastic. Next session starts promptly at 12, which is why I have to finish. It's on community benefits delivered. And again, if you can quickly run and grab that tea and you can quickly back and log in for the next session, that would be great. Craig, Neil, thank you.
Thanks, Stephen. Thank you, everybody.